You're listening to the Homeownership podcast by Momentum Realty, real estate talk for buying, selling, and owning property.
Hey guys, Sean Patrick Maloney here, broker owner of Momentum Realty, located in Hanover, Massachusetts. Welcome to episode 4, writing and reviewing an offer to purchase real estate. Writing an offer or receiving an offer is one of the best days in the entire time that you're going to deal with selling or buying your home, so let's talk a little bit more about the details of how that goes down. Whenever you're in a real estate transaction, it's always highly suggested that you use an attorney, but it is not required. The first thing as the buyer you want to look at is the entire overall home. Are you ready to make an offer? Do you understand everything that you need to put in that offer? So let's talk about what's in an offer, what the best way to fill out each category, and the way to write a winning offer, as well as the way to look through offers and accept the best offer possible for your home, not just concerned about price, but the best options so that the deal works best for you and your budget and your timelines. When you're a buyer and you're about to make an offer, you really want to look at the property hard and deep. You want to take a look. Is there anything available that's broken on the home that you know of now that's clear as day? Because if that's true, you want to put it in the offer. You want to make it known that you expect it to be in working condition after you receive the property. Some agents give you bad advice like, let's wait to the home inspection and bring it up then. The problem is you're already in a contract, and then you have to decide if the seller doesn't want to negotiate with you on that item. Do you want to let go of the house, letting go of your home inspection fee? That's a question that you're going to have to ask yourself in the future if you leave it to then. So I highly suggest anything that you see that's really wrong with the house, that's open to anybody's knowledge, that's going to be in the offer, and that way there your offer is honest. The next thing down you want to think about is, what is the best purchase price for the property for you? Now, the best purchase price for the property for you, the reason I say it that way, is it's hard to determine. First and foremost, you want to ask your agent or you yourself, you want to do a valuation of the property. A comparative market analysis is what we commonly call it in the industry. A lot of times they're done for the seller, but not as many people are doing them for the buyers. As a buyer's agent, you're doing your person the due diligence by doing a comparative market analysis and finding out what the comps actually are. And that way there, if the property price is overpriced, you know not to make an offer above that. But if the property is underpriced, you know that you have some room to move up. The thing that this will give you as a buyer is the power of knowledge. You'll get to know what's the actual price that you should offer on the property. Remember that the offering price is not the only thing that matters in an offer. Everybody's always concerned, what's the highest dollar amount, what's the highest dollar amount? Well, I'm here to tell you today that there's a lot more in it than that. So let's get started. In the purchase price department, just below it, we're going to have the deposits. The first deposit is due with the offer. That offer deposit usually ranges between $500 to say $3,000. This is earnest money to hold the house, to take the house off the market when they accept the offer. When they accept the offer, this money is going to go into an escrow account by the listing agency. It's going to be held there safe until they figure out where the home sale goes, whether it closes or if it doesn't make it to closing, who gets the money back. At which point, if there is a need to get money back, there'll be a mutual release of funds form needed so that both parties are signing that they agree with where the money goes. On the offer to purchase deposit, this money has usually a few contingencies in it. Depending on the way you write your offer, you can have anywhere from no contingencies to multiple contingencies. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. The next line down that we're going to get into in the offer is the second deposit check, which is due at the purchase and sale agreement's acceptance. People confuse this often to say, hey, these are my closing costs, or these my deposit, or what are these? So they are a deposit, both of them. They're a deposit to bind the offer and a deposit to bind the house. They are not your down payment, nor are they the closing costs. They may become your down payment at the end. If you put in an amount that is under your down payment amount, chances are it's going to be applied towards your down payment. If you put in an amount that's over your down payment amount, you may even be entitled to a check back. This is something we want to go over with the mortgage broker. The mortgage broker is someone really important when it comes to a lot of these dates and numbers. They're going to be the person that ultimately tells you what your money situation is and the timeline that they can perform within. The next box down we're going to have to fill out is the duration of the offer. This is when the offer expires by. For buyers and sellers, this is always a point of differentiation. They both want different things. The buyer wants the offer to expire quick, so that makes the seller make a decision and take the house off the market. The seller, if they have a hot house, wants it to go at the timeline they determine. What I suggest as an agent as well as a buyer is to reach out to the other agent and find out what their opinion is the best day for the duration of offer to end. This is extremely important when you're in a multiple offer situation where you're going to have an offer deadline. Never think that you're just going to put a deadline ahead of the other deadline and that you're going to end up getting the house. This usually means that you're going to short the deadline and that your offer isn't going to be valid at the time of acceptance, so therefore they won't even choose your offer. So be very careful with this. Make sure that you realize that not always can you strong arm a seller into making and accepting an offer just by putting a quick expiration date on it. The next date down that we're going to have to figure out when we're writing an offer is going to be the purchase and sale agreement date. The purchase and sale agreement date is usually done somewhere between 12 to 15 days from the offer to purchase, giving time for the home inspection to happen in between. The purchase and sale agreement date is actually a deadline. It is not the date that the purchase and sale agreement needs to be signed on. The purchase and sale agreement deadline is listed there, but I highly suggest that if you can get into a purchase and sale agreement early, you definitely want to do that, especially if you're a seller. The sooner you have your buyer in a purchase and sale agreement, the sooner that you drop some of the contingencies that were available before, like the home inspection and other items like that. As a buyer, you want to get into the purchase and sale agreement as soon as possible to just lock everything down and to get the whole deal processing. The next date down, the most exciting date, is the closing date. Now the closing date is somewhere where as a buyer and a seller, there's obviously advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes as a buyer, you need to land a home and you need to get in right away. So your closing date may have to be soon and it may have to be at a specific time or you can't do the house. As a seller, it may be the same thing. You may need to be out of a house by a certain time or you may need to hold the house till another time. You may have children in school or anything like that where you'd prefer to close after June or all these things. So when you're writing an offer, you want to reach out to the seller's agent and find out what is the best and optimal closing date for them. This is one of the departments where a couple $1,000s less but closing on the exact month and day where they say is going to give them more value than just a few thousand extra dollars, because by the time they rent a place, put their things in storage, and move again, it's too much on the family. So here's a place where we can beat out a higher offer by having a better closing date. So again, remember, whenever possible, reach out to the seller's agent and find out exactly how they would like to close and when they would like to close. The other one that you need to reach out to is if you're a buyer, you're going to have to talk to your mortgage professional. You need to talk to your mortgage professional and say how many days between the purchase and sale agreement and the closing do you need. So that way there you can make an offer that has real dates on it and you won't need to have an extension. Because you got to remember all these dates you need to follow as a buyer or you could lose your deposits. The next box down on a common offer form is going to be the escrow. The escrow agent is the person who holds the funds that are for the deposits in safekeeping until the real estate transaction closes. This is going to be the listing agent. As we work our way down the offer, we start to get to contingencies. Remember, you can have any type of contingency you want on a property. I'm not an attorney, but my advice is to have as many contingencies as you can to protect your money without having too many contingencies where it clearly is in one-way advantage street. But always go to a legal professional to get legal advice when you're writing contingencies. Some of the most common contingencies, the first one will be a mortgage contingency. If you're going to be borrowing money, it's important that the offer is contingent upon you receiving that money. Within that offer box, you're going to have a point where it asks you the amount of money you're financing. This is the amount of money that the house costs minus your deposit equals the money that you're going to be financing. When you're a seller and you're looking at this box, the higher the amount that they're financing, that means the lower the down payment is going to be, which means that it's a more risky loan than a higher down payment loan. Always make sure that when you look at this and it has a really high loan to value ratio, make sure you reach out to the mortgage professional or have your agent reach out to them to make sure that this is a good deal. Within this mortgage contingency, another thing you have is a commitment date. The commitment letter date is a date where the bank says we've gone through this person's records and we're now committing to the funds and they have declared a close as soon as everything's ready. We're ready to write the check. The commitment letter is usually anywhere from 7 to 14 days ahead of the closing date. The earlier you can get a commitment letter in as a buyer, the more secure your deal looks versus other deals. Remember, as a seller, the earlier the commitment date, the earlier the mortgage contingency is dropped, the earlier that you have the whole deal secured. So in an up market, it's very common for buyers to really want to put in an early commitment date. On a down market, it's common for buyers to want to put in a long commitment date. That way their money is protected until the last minute. As a seller, it's your choice and your legal advice to go with, but ultimately, the sooner the commitment date, the sooner your real estate sale is more secure. This is another place where price versus the security of the deal come into play. Sometimes if you have a higher price, it's tempting to take it, but the person has a little riskier of a loan, a lower percent down, and then also has a longer commitment date. You might start to look at the fact that maybe this other offer is a better option. The mortgage application date is usually done 1 to 2 days after the purchase and sale agreement. This is when the buyer actually goes into the mortgage professional and files a real application. This is when they order the appraisal and everything started. That's when it really starts getting serious. The next most common contingency is a home inspection contingency. This is a really important one. The home inspection is where you're going to have a home inspector come out. He or she is going to look over the entire property, and they're going to tell you everything that's physically, mechanically wrong with the property, and also give you some advice on how to take care of the property in the future. As a buyer, this is a really important thing to attend, as well as the buyer's agent. As a seller's agent, they're actually not obligated to be there, and the buyer actually can ask them to leave, or at least ask them for space while they're doing their home inspection. So make sure as a seller that you give them the right to do this. It's normal. It's not going to do anything. It's a good time to give them to look at the home. On a home inspection contingency, we usually give them about 10 days to get the home inspection done. This isn't always necessary, or also sometimes it's necessary to have even longer. You need to know the property and know how much it's going to take to inspect it, what the inspection timelines are, and what your local market can bear. For home inspection, don't forget that this isn't a time where you just have to have a home inspector. This is a time where you can have contractors, well people, irrigation specialists, oil tank people. Anyone that you have out just has to be a professional and has to be licensed in their job. And then what I tell people is when you're a buyer and you have a home inspection and something goes wrong, it's way easier to go at a home seller and negotiate the price of something if you have a contractor that came out and give a legitimate estimate. Ultimately, if you can get 3 estimates, that's a great way to actually negotiate with the seller. And as a seller, if somebody does come at you with a problem from a home, don't always just turn your back. You do have to think about the fact that if you walk away from this deal, a few more months carrying costs of the home may eat up more than just simply agreeing to the repairs or having a concession at the time of sale where they get money off for the repairs. When writing an offer with a home inspection contingency, one thing you can do to make your offer a little more secure than other ones is use one that has a limit on it that says if the property does not have XYZ amount of damages or problems, then we won't complain. You can write in any amount you want, $1,000, $5,000, $25,000 or whatever. This gives the seller surety that you're not going to come back at them with a $100 issue, which is commonly happening in the marketplace. And I can tell you, I've watched more buyers and sellers blow a deal apart over a bad home inspection than anything in the entire process. So don't get overwhelmed by it. Every house has something wrong with it, even the newest houses. Also remember, that doesn't mean it's a bad house. It just means something needs to be taken care of. And if it's a small thing, sometimes it's easy to just take care of it yourself. When it comes to home inspection, one of the most powerful things you do that combats versus purchase price is dropping a home inspection. While I can't give you legal advice to do this, I can tell you that when you remove a home inspection from an offer to purchase, that can be one of the most powerful moves, especially if the home's older or if they have concern of problems. I don't always advise this one, but what I do tell people is if you're going to do this one, just make sure when you're going to put in the offer, ahead of putting in the offer, you have a contractor or somebody that knows what they're doing come out and look at the property and take a look before the offer. That way there you make the offer based on what you know is there. Because if you think you just know everything about houses, it may be a high risk and it may not be worth it. And to do it just to win the thing, but then to buy a bad house could be even worse. So again, while I'm not legal representation and I would highly advise that, when dropping a home inspection, I would say you really want to have a contractor out and have it ready before. As a seller, when you get these offers and you're looking at them and you get an offer without a home inspection, this is a point where you really got to think about it. Are you willing to put yourself through a home inspection? Do you think that things are going to pop up? This may be a good offer to take. As a seller, you want to be crystal clear with the buyers that you're not going to move and that they opted to the no home inspection and that they took that. Some of the other common contingencies would be that the property must appraise at or above purchase price. This one's become more common in a climbing market. This protects the buyer from overpaying. As a seller, if you have 2 offers, one can have a home appraisal contingency and the other one doesn't, you have a multiple offer situation and you're climbing, it may be worth accepting that other offer because of the fact that you know that they don't have to appraise at or above purchase price and they can't renegotiate if they don't. This can be very powerful because if you run into a bad appraisal, this means you're going to have to reduce your price, and then you're also going to have to tell the public if the deal breaks apart that, hey, we lost the deal because they didn't want to pay too much for the house. which is really tough to then sell them. Two other common contingencies would be a home sale contingency and a suitable house contingency. These are both buyer and seller sides. So for a buyer, it's called suitable housing. So if you're selling a home and buying a home, you're looking to get into the next one, you're going to write a suitable housing clause saying that you won't sell your house to them unless you find a home and get an offer accepted or a closing, whatever you want to put for the terms, on a new home. The other option is you're a home seller and you say, yes, I'm going to accept your offer, but I'm only accepting your offer if I find suitable housing for myself. So when you have one of these in here, this can be really risky because when you accept this offer or when you write this offer, it really weakens the offer, it really pulls it apart, and it makes it very risky to both parties involved because if one of the houses doesn't close because of anything going on with it, then the other house can't close. The more you daisy chain the real estate transactions together, the higher the risk becomes and the more risk there is of having dates changed. Most oftenly, every house closes, but sometimes dates get delayed. Sometimes permits don't get issued in time. Sometimes other things come up. And you got to remember, the more people and more moving parts you have to the transaction, the more risk. One of the next things down that we always write down is representations and acknowledgments. These are things that have been told to us that may be wrong with the property or need to be taken care of on the property. Maybe there is a home warranty program or anything else. Most commonly, we write none here. The next things down is the buyer's default. If the buyer defaults on any of these obligations on this agreement, it says that they're going to suffer the consequences and that all monies paid in the deposit shall be paid to the seller to liquidate the damages. So be careful here as a buyer. You want to make sure that you follow the rules that you set forth here. As well as a seller, don't let a buyer walk away. Make sure that they always have an extension unless you're looking to get away from them. If you're not looking to get away from them, don't ever let them fall out of contract because letting either party fall out of contract can be risky to everyone involved. Last but not least, we have additional terms. And additional terms is one of the biggest categories out there. We could go on for days with different things that can be put in there, but I'm going to go over a couple of the most common. The first most common one is seller's concession. Seller's concession is when a buyer is asking a seller to give them money back at the closing. The wording for that is $5,000 will be paid to buyer by seller at time of closing for closing costs and prepaids. This money can't be used for anything other than closing costs and prepaids. Seller's concession is heavily governed by the banking organizations, and they have limits and caps on every single one. So it's really important to talk with your mortgage professional and find out what percentage that this money can equal so that you write an offer that your bank will back. As a seller, looking at seller's concession, don't be surprised when this comes up. This is very common. A lot of people are cash broke when they're going to buy a home and they're looking for money to make the closing happen. By denying them the seller's concession, sometimes you won't be able to make the deal happen. If you're going to counter them, this is a good place to go up on the purchase price and keep the seller's concession the same. Removing the seller's concession just simply means the deal can't happen. They don't usually ask for the seller's concession unless they need the money to close. So by moving the seller's concession out and not changing the purchase price, you're not doing yourself any favor, you're just eliminating a buyer. Push up the purchase price and leave the seller's concession there and see if they accept the offer that way. Even if they write a full price offer with seller's concession, you can push it up over full price because therefore it really is just full price, because if they're giving you $185 but they're taking $5 back, that's still $180. So make sure you move up to $190 with the $5 back. That way they have the money to make the closing happen and you have a happy buyer. Some of the other things that are under additional terms that are most common are things that are at the home that you may want left behind. Appliances that aren't listed, a swing set that's out back, or any other expectations as far as fixing and repairs. If there's a cracked window and you wanted that fixed, or if you wanted the oil tank left full, there's a lot of things you can put in here. Like I said at the beginning of this, there's a million different additional terms, but anything and everything that you expect to be the way that you expect it to be should be there. And if you say, oh wow, that's only a little box, you can write something called an addendum. When you write an addendum, it's an extra sheet. You want to write C addendum A and call the addendum addendum A. And then you're going to write on that sheet as much information as you need to know is crystal clear so that when this closing happens, you get exactly what you expect to happen. Remember as a buyer and seller that this is a heated moment and that facts only matter in business. Always go to the facts. Look at the comparative market analysis and figure out exactly what your home is worth or exactly what the home you're looking to buy is worth. And don't be surprised when people come down to numbers. This is a game of money. It will always be that way, and it'll never change, because even if you say it's only $5,000, think about what you're saying. It's only $5,000. So it's only $5,000 in each direction. So always remember, don't blow apart a home deal because of an offer to purchase. Make sure you look at the details, and you always counter and you always continue to work with the offer to purchase that you have. Never let anyone fall off the back burner, and always work every lead hard on the sale of your home or the purchase of a home. If they don't reply to that and you decide it's worth more money, write another offer and continue the process until you hit a price where you think, I can't go any higher, it's not worth that, and then walk away. But don't ever get offended when someone doesn't reply. You gotta remember, anybody that lists a home for a price at one point believed it was worth that price. So by you thinking, oh geez, I'm gonna write a lower offer, I don't get why they don't reply, because they think it's worth more money and they think you offended them. I know it doesn't make sense, but always think of money in the same direction as I told you before. If it's only $5,000, it's $5,000 in both directions. Thanks for joining me this week. If you're looking for expert real estate advice or you're looking for representation, please reach out directly to us at movementumrealty.com. Please make sure to follow the podcast, and we'll see you here next week.